At the family dinner, my parents told me I had no home anymore and kicked me out. So I sat there in stunned silence, fork still in my hand as Evelyn, my mother, smiled like she was announcing something noble. My father, Conrad, cleared his throat and said it as though it were a business decision. Maris, you're done living under this roof. You've taken enough. From now on you're on your own. My heart pounded in my chest because those words didn't even sound real. But then I looked across the table and saw Silas, my older brother, leaning back in his chair with that smug grin plastered on his face. That's when it hit me, this wasn't sudden. They had planned this together. The room spun as they listed off my supposed failures, calling me a burden and ungrateful. Evelyn's voice carried venom as she said I had sucked the family dry, even though I had been the one helping her with her endless errands, driving her places when she didn't feel like lifting a finger. Conrad said it was time I learned responsibility, by being thrown out like garbage. The laughter and chatter that had filled the room minutes before evaporated, leaving me burning in humiliation as my relatives shifted uncomfortably, none daring to defend me. I turned to Silas, hoping for even a shred of brotherly solidarity, but his smirk widened as if he had won something. He didn't need to say it aloud. I knew he had whispered in their ears, feeding them lies until they believed I was nothing more than dead weight. The betrayal landed like a knife twisting in my chest. These were supposed to be the people who loved me, who protected me, who guided me. Instead, they were discarding me like I had no worth. I left that table with nothing but the clothes on my back, no money, no plan, and nowhere to go. The cool night air stung my face as tears blurred my vision, but beneath the heartbreak something else sparked. Rage. A slow, simmering fire that told me I wasn't done, not by a long shot. They thought they could erase me, strip me of my home, my name, my place in the family. But what they didn't know was that betrayal can create something stronger than love. The unshakable drive for revenge. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. The first night after being cast out, I curled up in the backseat of my old sedan, jacket pulled tight against the creeping cold. Streetlights buzzed above me, but I barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, the echo of my parents' voices came back, slicing through me. By morning, I dragged myself to a gas station, scrubbing my face in the cramped bathroom, praying no one noticed how hollow my eyes looked. I bought the cheapest sandwich I could find with the last few crumpled bills in my wallet, chewing slowly to make it last. Days blurred together like that. Nights in the car, quick showers in places meant for travelers, not for a daughter discarded by her own blood. I reached out to people I thought would stand by me. Old classmates, a few coworkers, even a couple of distant cousins. Every response was the same polite refusal, an excuse thinly veiled. Some didn't answer at all. My phone, once full of noise, now felt heavier with silence than I could bear. It wasn't long before I learned why. Whispers filtered back to me. My parents had been busy poisoning my name. Evelyn had told anyone who would listen that I was unstable, impossible to live with, a constant drain. Conrad backed her story, painting me as reckless and irresponsible. Their lies stuck like tar, and no one wanted to risk being close to me. It wasn't just abandonment, it was exile. The betrayal deepened when I overheard something that made my blood boil. I had parked near a restaurant one evening, trying to find a quiet corner to breathe. Through the thin crack of my window, I caught the sound of Silas's voice, loud and smug as ever. He was telling a friend how he didn't have to worry anymore. With me gone, everything would fall neatly into his lap. Inheritance, property, respect. He laughed as though it were the sweetest victory, like my suffering was the price of his fortune. My stomach knotted, not from hunger but from rage. Alone, stripped of dignity, smeared by lies, still I refused to break. Every cold night in that car, every rejection, every cruel whisper only sharpened the edge of what was forming inside me. If Silas thought I was out of the picture, he was wrong. Very wrong. After weeks of drifting, hope came from the last place I expected. I ran into Agatha Whitlow, a woman whose name had always floated through family stories like a ghost from another time. She had been my grandmother's closest confidant, sharp-eyed and a little odd, but with a warmth that made you lean in when she spoke. When she saw me, ragged and worn, she didn't ask questions filled with judgment. She simply touched my arm and said, "You look like her. Come with me." Agatha's house sat on the edge of town, ivy crawling up its stone walls, wind chimes clinking softly in the breeze. She led me past her garden and toward a weathered guest house tucked behind the trees. The key she pressed into my hand felt heavier than gold. Inside it was small but whole. An actual bed, running water, space that belonged to me if only for a while. After nights in my car, it felt like stepping into another world. One evening, as we shared tea at her creaky kitchen table, Agatha leaned close. Her voice dropped, carrying the kind of weight that only secrets hold. She told me there were things my grandmother had wanted me to have, things my parents had worked hard to bury. I sat frozen, her words unraveling the tight knot of despair that had taken root inside me. My parents hadn't just abandoned me, they had stolen something that was rightfully mine. The fire that had been flickering inside me roared to life. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't drifting without ground beneath my feet. I had shelter, I had someone who believed in me, and now I had the beginning of a truth they couldn't keep hidden forever. For the first time since that night at the dinner table, I felt steady. Safe enough to breathe, strong enough to start imagining what came next. Agatha's kindness wasn't just a roof over my head. It was a reminder that I hadn't been erased. And the secret she placed in my hands became more than a revelation. It was a weapon waiting to be sharpened. I finally had the start of something they couldn't control. And I wasn't going to waste it. In the quiet of the guest house, I pored over the box Agatha slid across the table one late afternoon. It smelled of cedar and thyme, filled with papers my grandmother had entrusted to her before she passed. My hands shook as I unfolded a brittle document, my grandmother's handwriting etched clearly in the margins. The words cut through me. Her estate wasn't meant to vanish into my parents' hands alone. A portion of the lake property, the place where she had raised us on summers filled with laughter and campfires, was supposed to belong to me. The realization struck like lightning. My parents hadn't just stripped me of dignity at that dinner. They had erased me from her legacy. They had rewritten the story to make sure I stood with nothing, while Silas and the rest bathed in the inheritance. The more I compared notes, the clearer it became. Signatures altered, dates inconsistent, details twisted. They had forged away my place in the family's history. Agatha's eyes gleamed with something between sorrow and fire as she told me not to let it go. Your grandmother wanted you to have it. She trusted you. Don't let them bury her wishes along with her. Her words sank deep, fueling the determination already clawing inside me. This wasn't about comfort anymore. It was about justice. I began collecting threads of evidence like a spider weaving a web. Old letters where my grandmother had mentioned leaving the property for me. Receipts with her handwriting that tied her directly to the land. Even a hidden copy of the will Agatha had tucked away, nearly forgotten but now priceless. Each piece I gathered felt like a stone in the foundation of something larger, something strong enough to crush their lies. I carried a small recorder, slipping it on during phone calls, even catching fragments of conversations that revealed more than my parents realized. Every whisper, every careless slip of the tongue became part of a puzzle I was carefully building. Alone in the stillness of the guest house, I laid out those pieces across the table, staring at them like a general studying a battlefield map. They thought I was broken, discarded. But with every document, every word of proof, I was arming myself. Their fraud wouldn't stay hidden forever. And when the time came, it wouldn't just expose them, it would destroy them. The night of the party, the Caldwell estate glowed with lights, music spilling into the street as if nothing in the world could touch their perfect image. I slipped through the side gate, heart pounding, hidden by the noise and the endless parade of guests arriving in polished cars. Inside, laughter rang from every corner, crystal glasses clinking, the air thick with the smell of wealth and pretense. No one noticed me weaving through the crowd, just another shadow blending into the spectacle. I found Silas holding court near the bar, charm dripping from his words as he entertained a cluster of admirers. I didn't approach directly, not yet. Instead, I brushed past close enough for him to hear my low murmur. Funny how secrets never stay buried. His smile faltered for half a second before snapping back into place, but I saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. I kept moving, never giving him the satisfaction of a full confrontation. Throughout the evening, I let fragments of knowledge slip into conversations with guests, never specific, just enough to unsettle. Funny the things you find in old papers, I said casually to one couple. You'd be surprised how much isn't what it seems. Words spread quickly in a place like that, each whisper twisting into something larger by the time it reached the next ear. The room began to hum with unease, though no one could name why. By the time Silas realized I was playing him, it was too late. He cornered our parents in the library, voice raised, face red with frustration. I stayed hidden just outside the doorway, listening as he demanded to know how much they had told me, if I had gotten my hands on something they thought destroyed. Evelyn hissed at him to lower his voice, but Conrad's booming reply only added fuel to the fire. The cracks in their alliance widened with every word. I slipped out before they noticed, the taste of victory sharp on my tongue. I hadn't exposed the truth outright yet. But the fear in Silas's eyes, the panic in his voice, told me the first strike had landed. Doubt now lived inside their home, gnawing at the walls they had built around their lies. And I intended to feed it until the entire structure collapsed. The more I dug, the more I uncovered, and soon a new thread emerged. One I hadn't expected. Buried in account ledgers and transaction slips was a trail of numbers that didn't add up. Funds funneled out, shell accounts receiving steady deposits, all tied back to Silas. He hadn't just been waiting for inheritance. He was already bleeding Conrad's company from the inside. I knew exactly what to do with it. I compiled the records, stripped away anything that could trace back to me, and drafted a neat, anonymous package. Copies of statements, timelines of transfers, and a clear map showing the money siphoned away under Silas's name. I mailed it quietly to the men who had trusted Conrad for years. The ones who held contracts worth millions. Then I waited. The fallout didn't take long. Meetings collapsed into shouting matches. Partnerships that had propped up the family business for decades evaporated overnight. Rumors spread through boardrooms and social circles alike. Conrad Caldwell couldn't control his own son, and worse, he hadn't even noticed the theft until it was shoved under his nose. To them, it wasn't just incompetence, it was betrayal. The contracts dried up one by one, and with them the steady flow of money the family had always taken for granted. Inside the estate, the impact showed. Evelyn's pristine smile curdled into something sharp and brittle. She snapped at staff, accused neighbors of gossiping, and refused to be seen at luncheons where once she reigned supreme. Conrad grew heavier with silence, pacing hallways as though numbers alone might repair what had already shattered. And Silas, he couldn't hide the tension twisting through him, though he still tried to swagger as if nothing had changed. But everyone could see it. The cracks were no longer private. They were spreading across their image for all to witness. What once looked like untouchable perfection now reeked of desperation. And I, from the safety of distance, watched their foundation weaken. Each choice I made chipped away at the pedestal they'd built for themselves. They thought they had cast me out, silenced me, but the truth was simple. I was the one pulling the strings now, and they were dancing straight into collapse. The documents I had gathered sat neatly in a folder, every page a weapon sharpened for the moment I would strike. I walked into the law office with my pulse steady, not as the cast-out daughter but as someone holding undeniable power. The attorney, a gray-haired man with a reputation for precision, flipped through each sheet carefully. First the original draft of the will, then the altered version my parents had paraded as truth. His expression hardened the further he read. He set the papers down, fingers steepled, eyes fixed on me. "You understand what this means," he said slowly. "If we move forward, it won't just be a private dispute. The forgery, the concealment, the fraud, it will strip them of credibility. Their name, their standing, everything they've built will unravel." His words hung heavy, a warning cloaked in professionalism. He was asking if I was prepared to detonate the foundation of the Caldwell legacy. I didn't flinch. For years they had made me feel like a shadow, like I was nothing without their approval. But here for the first time the balance tilted in my favor. I thought of Silas boasting about inheriting everything, of Evelyn's smug dismissal, of Conrad's cold decree that I had no place left. I thought of nights spent in my car, the hunger, the loneliness, the shame they had forced me to swallow. And suddenly hesitation had no space left inside me. "I'm not here for their reputation," I said. "I'm here for the truth. And I won't stop until it's seen." The lawyer nodded, sliding the folder back toward me. "Then be prepared. Once this begins, there's no undoing it." I tucked the papers under my arm, feeling the weight not as a burden but as resolve. I had everything I needed, proof that they weren't just cruel but criminal. They had gambled that I would disappear quietly, that their lies would hold forever. But I was still here, and I wasn't chasing reconciliation. This wasn't about forgiveness. It was about ending their hold over me, tearing down the empire they built on deceit. And I was ready to light the match. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with murmurs as neighbors, distant relatives, and business associates filled the benches. Faces turned toward me as I walked to my seat, whispers darting like sparks, but I kept my head high. This was the day everything they had hidden would be dragged into the open. Across the aisle sat Evelyn, stiff in her tailored suit, lips pressed so tightly they were nearly white. Conrad loomed beside her, his jaw set like stone. Silas leaned back with arms crossed, feigning confidence, though the twitch in his jaw betrayed him. When the judge called the case forward, my attorney rose and presented the evidence piece by piece. The room stilled as copies of the authentic will were projected, my grandmother's handwriting clear, her intentions undeniable. Then came the comparison, altered signatures, dates twisted, clauses erased. Gasps rippled through the crowd, people exchanging stunned looks as the pattern of deception unfolded. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward Conrad. He tried to mask his panic with bluster, muttering denials under his breath, but the damage was irreversible. The judge's sharp gavel cut through their protests. "Enough," he said, voice firm. "The evidence speaks for itself. This was deliberate falsification." I glanced at Silas, waiting for the smug mask to crack. It did. His face burned red as the realization spread that the future he had counted on was evaporating in front of witnesses who once admired him. He clenched his fists under the table, the fury radiating from him almost tangible. The humiliation etched across his features was everything he deserved. The judge's ruling was clear. My grandmother's true wishes would be honored, my share of the estate restored to me in full. No loopholes left, no hiding behind forged papers or whispered lies. The gavel came down, final and sharp, sealing their disgrace. A silence stretched through the room before whispers erupted again, this time not about me but about them. The liars, the frauds, the family that had built their empire on deceit. Conrad and Evelyn sat frozen, stripped of the image they had worked so hard to protect. For once I didn't feel like an outsider watching their perfect world. I was the one standing in the light, while theirs crumbled in front of everyone they had ever sought to impress. The verdict sent ripples far beyond the courthouse. Within weeks, Conrad's company began to wither under the weight of scandal. Longtime partners severed ties, clients withdrew, and employees quietly slipped away to more stable ground. Offices once buzzing with confidence now stood half-empty, the hum of phones replaced by silence. Investors who once praised his leadership turned their backs, leaving him scrambling in meetings that ended with closed doors and cold handshakes. His empire, the pride he wore like armor, crumbled piece by piece until nothing of its former glory remained. Evelyn, who had once lived for her place in society, found those doors closed to her too. Invitations vanished, calls went unanswered, and neighbors who used to fawn over her now crossed the street to avoid eye contact. She retreated behind drawn curtains, the woman who once thrived on attention reduced to shadows in her own home. Whispers followed her name, and no matter how she tried to maintain dignity, her isolation betrayed her. Silas unraveled the fastest. Stripped of the future he had boasted about, he lashed out at the very people who had fed his arrogance. Shouting matches echoed through the estate's halls, blame tossed in every direction, though deep down it landed squarely on himself. The weight of humiliation dragged him down, his bravado cracking into bitterness and reckless spirals. Once he had strutted through rooms certain of his place. Now he drifted unmoored, consumed by anger and shame. From a distance, I watched their undoing with a calm I had never known before. The house that once felt suffocating now stood as a monument to their downfall, its grandeur hollowed by silence and decay. For years they had held power over me with cruelty and lies, but now, stripped of reputation, wealth, and pride, they had nothing left to wield. I didn't need to shout my victory or parade it in front of them. Their misery was louder than anything I could say. I saw them diminished not as the towering figures who had cast me out, but as broken people trapped in the ruins of their own choices. And in that sight I found a grim satisfaction. At last the balance had shifted and I was the one standing free while they crumbled. The keys felt cool in my hand as I opened the door to the lakeside house. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floors, carrying the scent of pine from the water beyond. Every creak, every beam, Every stone in the fireplace carried traces of my grandmother's care. For the first time, I wasn't a guest or an intruder. I was home. Agatha became a constant presence, arriving with baskets of food, stories of summers past, and a kind of affection that didn't demand anything in return. We sat on the porch overlooking the water, sharing laughter that eased the weight I had carried for so long. With her, I felt the dignity and respect my own parents had denied me, and each day in that space stitched me back together. One evening, I drove past the estate I had once been forced from. The grand house loomed in silence, windows dark, gardens overgrown. What had once been a stage for pride now stood like a mausoleum, abandoned by the very people who had worshipped its grandeur. I slowed, the sight striking me with a strange mixture of closure and triumph. Rolling down the window, I whispered into the night air, "You said I had no home anymore. You were wrong." The words didn't carry anger, they carried certainty. The lake shimmered when I returned, reflecting the life I had rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, anchored in a place that was mine by right and by choice. The future stretched before me, steady and unshakable, proof that even the deepest wounds could forge strength. Do you think I was right to take back what was mine, or should I have walked away without revenge? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story.